Procrastination is how fear shows up in my life. What I didn't actually realize, and why I'm sharing this with you, is fear is real. It Whether it's fear of failure, fail of being judged, fear of being thought less than. This is such a debilitating emotion, and it may manifest in you, the person with aphasia, in many different ways, or if you're the spouse of the person with aphasia. For me, procrastination means I don't think I can do it. So I put it off or I make excuses. I get caught up in the weeds. But it doesn't have to be this way.
Welcome to the Listen for Life podcast with Genevieve Richardson. Genevieve is a speech-language pathologist rehabilitating adults with communication challenges after a stroke or due to a neurological impairment. Get equipped with knowledge from experts in the field and professionals you need to know. We'll hear stories and experiences from others who are navigating life with aphasia. So, put your earphones in and take a walk outside. This isn't just a podcast. This is a community, a resource, and a support system. We're in this together. Do life.
Welcome to this episode of the Listen for Life Aphasia podcast. We're jumping into some of the emotions that go along with aphasia. And the reason I bring them up is because acknowledging these emotions, understanding how our behavior, what people see on the outside, is a reflection of what we feel and what we think about ourselves on the inside. This impacts every person on earth, and it may be showing up in a different way for you than it does for me. So let's talk about what is fear. It's a natural protective response to perceived danger. It's actually a biochemical reaction in our bodies. And we can experience this through sweating, a rapid heartbeat, that sinking feeling in your stomach, that feeling of dread. And it's there to help us prepare for a threat, to run away from it. It's that fight or flight you've heard about. Fear can also be psychological and manifest itself as anxiety, which can be paralyzing, especially when it comes to thinking about communication. For folks with aphasia, they fear what others will think of them. They are afraid of not being seen or heard or understood. They worry that people will judge them based on their communication difficulties and think that they are less intelligent or less capable. These fears extend to interactions with family, friends, even strangers, such as the barista at Starbucks or a waiter in a restaurant. And these fears can be paralyzing and go far beyond just the act of communicating. It can lead to isolation by not taking on opportunities or seeing opportunities for what they are as moments to practice, to put into play the things that you've learned if you're still in speech therapy, or continuing to apply what you've learned as far as communication strategies. So caregivers and spouses, they also have similar fears for their loved ones. They fear that their loved one isn't going to be treated with respect and dignity, leading to feelings of hopelessness and frustration. They are afraid of how others will treat their person. They worry that they're going to have to go to battle out in public if their person is not being treated with respect. And that can be scary. Not all of us are built to be lions and to face these fears head on. Many of us like to, kind of stand back and not have confrontations. So, spouses and care partners of persons with aphasia also have their own fears. They fear for their own health or the sustainability of their caregiving role. They might worry about the future, finances. navigating a complicated healthcare system, or feeling like they might not be able to meet all the needs of their loved one. So, how do we recognize fear in yourself and in others? In my personal story, procrastination. That is the manifestation of my fear. And it could be procrastination for making a phone call, mailing a letter, um, putting out some kind of marketing, following through with my plan, my program development, and actually getting it finished, maybe not complete. So let's take a tangent and talk about what does not complete mean. Have you heard the phrase of good is good enough and that you have to let go of your perfectionistic tendencies? I used to torture myself when I was in college, staying up late, studying for a test, finishing a paper, whatever the case may be. I would just torture myself by thinking, oh, I can do better. I can just keep pushing. But then what does that do for me? It takes away my sleep. It can cause me to get sick. It can cause anxiety and stress. So, how do we figure out how to do good is good enough and work towards perfection, but not from the get go? Let's say it's making that phone call. Have your notes ready in front of you, make the phone call, write down notes from it, and deal with these feelings. This morning, I realized I was procrastinating on a big project. I was getting caught up in the weeds rather than just getting it out there, getting it to a point where I could explain it to others and have it make sense, and letting go of perfection. I thought I was aware of it. I thought I was paying attention to it. But apparently, I wasn't all the way there in my own insight. And it took feedback from my husband to get me to realize what I was thinking in my head was not coming across. Like, I thought I had my project further along in my head, but when I verbalized it, it wasn't anywhere near where it needed to be. So, how did I deal with it? I went and put my bare feet in the grass. This is a newer thing for me, and it might sound a little woo woo for you if you've never done it. But I find just taking a minute, literally 60 seconds, I take off my shoes, I put my toes in the grass, and I breathe and I think. And what I did also is I verbalized, what was this fear? How was this fear? What were the words in my head that I was telling myself that was based in fear that was keeping me from moving forward? I verbalized it. I took a couple of deep breaths and I let it go. And now I'm sitting here sharing this on this episode with you. I literally did this morning. So let's take this back to aphasia. And how can we recognize behaviors that could be based in fear? For me, it's procrastination, but for the person with aphasia, it might be avoidance. So let's talk about John. John has returned back to work. He has a wife and adult kids, and he used to be the one that would host all the family barbecues. He loves to cook, share stories, and he was also an amazing executive working in sales in his company. But for John, what he needed to realize is that he was avoiding specific social situations. He had a habit before his stroke of meeting with his best friend for dinner or drinks at least once a month, sometimes more. So, on schedule, like he anticipated, John's best friend would call and John would let the call go to voicemail. he would not talk to his friend, and rather he used text messaging to respond to his friend and decline the invitation, making some weak excuse as to why he couldn't make it that month. So John was avoiding. The other thing John was doing is he was declining to host a barbecue. His oldest daughter was getting married, and he and his wife had talked about, and all of them as a family had talked about having the future in-laws over for a meal, just nice and casual, kind of get to know you. But instead, he declined to take on that responsibility. He instead wanted it scaled way down. He wanted to do it at a restaurant. And when it got to the day, he was actually trying to get out of going to that gathering at the restaurant to get to know the future in laws. How might someone else with aphasia show fear? They might choose silence. They may be in their home and there's other people there, whether it's a spouse or kids or friends, neighbors, whatever it may be, and they may choose to sit on the outskirts, or they may just nod and shake their heads and not try to say words or participate in any way. They just sit on the outskirts. Well, that won't be just a one-time thing. If we don't recognize how their silence or minimal communication or their physical distance from a group gathering, all of those can be signs of fear. They're sitting on the outside. And the problem is that can lead over time to isolation, where sometimes it might just be easier to let them do that thing than to coax them to bring them back into the center of that group gathering. Another way the person with aphasia might be showing fear is that they depend much more on their care partner or spouse. They let the person make the decision as to what they're going to eat for dinner at home, or order for them and say, you know what I like, you order for me. They may allow that care partner, and sometimes they may think it's just easier to let the care partner make those decisions for them. But what message is that really sending? The message is that their opinion doesn't matter, that it's just easier for the care partner to order for them and they'll just deal with whatever comes and not complain. Another way the person with aphasia might show fear is irritability or frustration. For John, his wife would often ask him, well, how was your day at work? And he would snap right back at her because he was embarrassed to tell her that he delegated customer questions to a subordinate on his staff, or that he didn't want to talk about what he worked on in speech therapy because he was embarrassed about needing to have speech therapy to begin with. So, irritability and frustration can also be a sign of fear of being judged, fear of being thought of as less than or not capable of doing something. So, how can fear manifest for the spouse or the care partner of the person with aphasia? One of the spouses I've worked with in the past, she had an overprotectiveness. She often avoided taking her husband to situations because she would kind of prejudge who would be there and think, well, are they going to be accepting? Are they going to be nice to him? Are they going to smile? Or are they just going to ignore him? So she chose some avoidance as a way of being overprotective and protecting his feelings. A different spouse might show fear by restlessness, irritability, trouble sleeping. Of course, all of these can be rooted in other things other than fear, but it can also be fear. They might be expressing their constant worry about their loved one's well being and future. They may have so much anxiety and stress and fear that they feel like they can't do things for themselves, that they can't take 5 minutes and have a cup of coffee in the morning, that they have to sacrifice or martyr themselves for their loved one. All of that can be a sign of anxiety, stress, and fear. Micromanaging can be another way that the spouse shows fear, monitoring every aspect of their loved one's life, from healthcare to daily activities, judging how other people interact with their loved one with aphasia. They may feel like, again, they have to take on all aspects of their caregiving role, and they struggle to delegate or seek help from others. They may also be withdrawing from social interactions, turning down invitations, even when they used to have these well established social interactions with others. And they may neglect their health. All of this could be fear, fear of the unknown, fear of them being judged by others, that they are not a great caregiver, or that they should be doing more, or whatever the case may be. So now that we've laid the foundation, the framework of what fear can look like in both the person with aphasia, the spouse or care partner, as well as my own story, let's move on to what are some actionable steps, because understanding is one part of it. The other part is putting some steps into action. And I'll give you a caveat with action steps. The best thing you can do is pick a step, try it out, see how it feels, evaluate it, and then tweak it from there, pivot from there. So let's give you some ideas for action steps for dealing with fear. First, you have to acknowledge it. What is it? Name it to tame it. This is a psychological strategy. I've heard it in lots of different ways from lots of different people over the years. Name it to tame it. This morning, when I had my toes in the grass, I spoke out loud what my fear was and what was holding me back from getting this big project done that I know needs to be done, is necessary, and that I know how to do it. I had to name it to tame it. But maybe you're not comfortable saying these things out loud yet. So, what's an intermediate step? Could you write it down? One of my favorite things to do is to journal. I like to get on paper what is in my head. And when I journal, I don't judge it. I don't think about it. I just let the thoughts flow. But what if you have a hard time, if you're willing to journal, but what if you have a hard time getting started? Why don't you just start by writing down your name? Why don't you start by writing down the names of your family and friends, or writing down the things you see in front of you on your desk or the table that you're sitting at? Just get the pen moving on the paper. That's how you start. Journaling can be such an incredibly powerful tool for self reflection. Once you get that pen moving, write down your fears. Think about what is triggering your fears. Think about it from all the different angles you can. Because going through this process will help you gain a clearer understanding of your emotions. Once you can kind of categorize and understand, almost like put in a ball. I visualize kind of like this ball of energy, and now I've taken stuff out of my head through journaling, and I've kind of put it together, and now I can look at it through different angles, and I can think about what is my next step. For me, I have to work on some breathing. And it's not fancy breathing. You can do something as simple as box breathing. 4 seconds in, Hold your breath for 4 seconds, 4 seconds out, hold for 4 seconds, and then repeat. Four in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold. Just do that. When you feel these emotions, the fear taking over, do box breathing. What else can you do? Who do you trust in your life that you could pick up the phone, send a text message to, reach out to on social media, somebody in your support group, somebody in your book club? Who is it that you trust that you could say, hey, I need an ear. Can you listen? So let's talk about John again. So John was avoiding social interactions with his friends. He was avoiding getting to know the in-laws because he was afraid of being judged when his words didn't come out or if he couldn't fully express himself. He delegated tasks at work because, again, he was afraid of being judged or being thought of as less intelligent if he couldn't give the solution for a customer problem directly to who he needed to share this with. So instead, he delegated it. What John came to find out and realize and put into practice that he had to face his fears. For him, saying it out loud was very powerful and empowering for him. Once he started doing this on a regular basis, and it didn't take very long, then he was able to start connecting with his wife, sharing his fears out loud with her so that they could talk about it and problem solve and come up with small steps that he could take. Then, because his writing, it was decent, but he didn't feel super confident with his writing, he asked his wife to write down the steps that he could follow to address some of these situations at work. He started to recognize early on when he was avoiding a situation, and now he had his wife who he was connected with who could help him talk through it, walk through it, and write down notes that he could follow. John also learned box breathing. Again, it sounds funny, but it was one of the small things that he implemented on a regular basis before he picked up the phone in his office. You know, the light comes on, it starts to ring. He would just spend a couple of rings and do his box breathing, get himself centered, and then answer the phone. Fear, anxiety are our body's way of protecting ourselves. And when you have aphasia, or if you have a loved one with aphasia, or if you're just going through life and you're doing new things that are outside of your comfort zone, the first step is recognizing these outward behaviors. If you're being irritable, if you're avoiding, if you're delegating but not in a good way because you want to avoid something, you need to find a way to control your emotions, breathing, putting your toes in the grass, maybe, getting an ally, someone to speak to. If you're not ready for that, journaling or saying things out loud. When you name it, you can tame it. Fear doesn't have to rule you. Fear doesn't have to control you. It can be managed. If you don't have someone to talk to yet, make a list next time you're with the piece of paper or with your journal. Who is in your life? Start making a list. Again, sometimes just thinking these things, it can feel overwhelming. It can feel like you are all alone. But when you can write it down, list all the people you know, list the people that you talk to on a regular basis in your family. Do you have a neighbor? Who are the people in your immediate environment? Who are the people in a little bit wider circle in your environment? Who can you trust? Maybe it's an old friend from high school. Maybe it's a former work colleague that you used to really connect with, but you drifted away from for whatever reason. Think about how you can gain control. I really hope you got some good tidbits from this episode. It's it was very empowering to me to share my own story with you, to tell you what I work on in my own life and how I'm starting to recognize my fear and my tendency to fall back on this being a perfectionist as an excuse for not going for it. So I hope you got some good ideas from this episode. And I'd love to hear what you thought of it and how you think fear manifests for you. To help you on your journey of self reflection at Life Speech Pathology, we've created a new tool. It's called the Communication Strengths Wheel, and it's about helping you with prompts and a rating scale. Look at 8 primary areas in your life, whether it's your interactions with your spouse or the people that are in your home, friends and family outside of the home, how you use technology to communicate, how you interact with your doctors, how you interact out in the community, whatever the case may be. So, this self reflection tool is free, it's available to you. You can download it directly from our website. If you go to dolifespeechpathology.com, on the homepage it says get started today or get started here. You click on any one of those buttons, it takes you directly to the communication strengths wheel. Download it, print it out, fill it out. And if you would like free, no obligation feedback about what you've learned on this wheel, going through this process, email me the pictures of your wheel and I will get back to you with a video and tell you some ideas for next steps. You don't have to do this alone. Everyone with aphasia or their care partner or spouse of someone with aphasia, you deserve to be seen, heard, understood, and supported. And that is our mission at the Listen for Life Aphasia podcast, as well as Life Speech Pathology. Wishing you all an amazing week, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen for Life podcast. We hope you feel empowered and supported. Head over to listenforlifepodcast.com to see the show notes with links and information from today's episode. Do you have a topic, a resource to share, or a guest recommendation? Inquiring minds want to know. Let us know in the comments section. Wishing you a fabulous week.